What does the future hold for Palantir stock? This is the question on the minds of every investor in Palantir after this tremendous surge they posted upon their recent earnings beat. The share price jumped over 20% on this recent earnings release, and they're up nearly 200% year to date. This has been by far one of the best performing investments in my portfolio. Welcome, one and all, to the Fiscal Philosophy YouTube channel. I consider myself to be a value oriented investor, and I happen to own shares of Palantir stock. Now, you might be saying to yourself, a value investor owning Palantir stock? What's that all about? I thought value investors didn't understand growth. I thought they only bought dinosaur companies that are cheap. Well, one thing, growth is an important component of value. Because when you buy any business, you're buying a piece of their future earnings and cash flow, not the past. The past is done. So when it comes to any business, you have to make assumptions about the future, and that determines the price you pay today. So I personally got into Palantir when it was just over $6. So my basis is around $6.22, I believe, is the exact number. And to me, when it was in that below $7 range, it started to make sense to me from a value perspective if they continued a certain amount of growth. So let's get right into Palantir, and I'll go over some of the fundamentals and eventually get to my personal valuation on the company. The first item of interest for Palantir is going to be their revenue growth. This is the picture of consistency. If you looked up consistency in the dictionary, I think you could see a picture of Palantir's revenue growth. But it isn't absolutely insane. A lot of growth companies, they just try to grow top line at all costs, and they don't really pay attention to how efficiently they do it. I do think Palantir has done a pretty good job, especially recently, of converting this top line growth into bottom line results. Palantir's impressive gross margins, of course, contribute to their ability to translate that top line revenue growth into bottom line success. Especially recently, they've just crossed over the 80% line for gross margins. They're typically in the high 70s, like 78, 79% range. So this may not seem like much, but when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in top line revenue every quarter, an extra percentage of gross margin could translate into millions of dollars in bottom line profit. Historically, one of the major drags on their bottom line has been their high level of share based compensation. This has really been a thorn in the side of shareholders since the early days of Palantir being publicly traded. However, they have made efforts to drive this down as far as possible in recent quarters, and they mentioned on their earnings call that they're really committed to doing so. On that same earnings call, they passed a really important milestone for the business. This is the first time since being publicly traded that they have ever posted positive EPS on a trailing 12 months basis. It goes to show what consistent revenue growth with high gross margins can really do over a few years. Palantir is also showing consistently growing free cash flow, which is always nice to see since at the end of the day, it is cash that pays the bills. And speaking of cash, Palantir has so much of it sitting around that they could pay off all of their debts and still have over $3 billion just hanging around. That's what I call a financially solid position. Currently, the analysts give Palantir a consensus rating of hold. This makes some sense based on some of the factors at play with Palantir. As you can see on the analyst price forecasts, the low end is only $5. The high is a massive $25, which is still another 20 plus percent past today's price. with the average falling somewhere in between at about 13.25. This is one where I think I understand, the mentality, or, where the low one is coming from. I'm having a little bit of a hard time comprehending the $25 price on this, but we'll get into my own valuation shortly. If you're finding the video informative and helpful so far, I'd like to encourage you to use a mandible claw on the like button and subscribe so you can catch more of my videos. Remember to hit that bell button. Regarding my valuation of Palantir, my idea behind this is pretty simple. So I assume that EPS for the fiscal year will come out to about the 23 cents that we're talking about. And I also think that a 12.5% discount rate is reasonable for taking on the extra risk involved with Palantir, being that it's a newer company, it's considered a growth company, and growth is great just until it slows down or stops, right? And of course, I give them credit for that strong balance sheet, the positive tangible book value. It's a lot of it's cash, so definitely going to give them credit for holding all those stacks. Now, with regards to EPS growth, I think something in the mid-teens probably makes sense. Over the next few years, it's expected to accelerate at a rate that's a lot faster than that, much higher than the revenue growth, simply because as they've now broken into positive EPS, a much higher proportion of the revenue is now going to translate into the bottom line, whereas before it was just kind of overcoming things like the SG&A. But then I do think over time it will eventually slow down to about the rate of the revenue growth, and then I think revenue growth will eventually slow and things will peter down to the mid to high single digits probably in the longer term. And so for that, I think coming up with a fair value in the low sixes, and granted my assumptions may have been slightly different a year ago, and it might have gotten me to something like $6.50 or $7 at that time, but still we're in the ballpark where, okay, if I want to sell some puts below $7 when it's that cheap, it starts to make a lot of sense that with the options premium and everything else, probably we're in a pretty good spot at that point. Now, when it comes to the analysts and what they might be modeling for, honestly, the target that I'm seeing on their EPS is that they are expecting 60 cents per share by 2027. So, I wonder, okay, if we put in a 10% discount rate and do the 60 cents, I mean, even that isn't getting us to the high price forecast for the 12-month for what analysts are saying. Even if we only do a 10% discount rate, which what are you buying an individual stock like Palantir for if you're happy with just a 9 or 10% return? I have genuinely no idea about that. And then, are we saying we are giving them credit for 2027's projected numbers as though it's today's, right? Applying a standard discount rate, still giving them credit for their today's tangible book value, and still saying, yes, even after they hit that 60 cents, we expect them to grow EPS at 15% a year for 10 years. Even then, I'm still only getting it up to, $17. And, this is, just a little bit lower than what it's trading for today. So I can see how it got to, $18, $19, right? But I just don't see where people are getting, the idea that it should be a $25 stock right now. And I'm personally still liking it, 7 or below, just like I was earlier this year. I think that's still a pretty fair value. And, that's just where I'm settling on it. and where it makes the most sense to me, where I think I'm pretty likely to get my 12, 13% that I'm wanting to get. Granted, right now I'm up 180% or something like that on the stock. I could just, realize that profit right now and not worry about the long term. But honestly, at this price, I'm with the analysts as far as the hold goes. I'm happy holding it. What I am doing though is I am selling covered calls. I have one expiring. I think it's like in January at the $20 strike price. Yeah, if this thing soars past 20 and I end up losing the shares at $20, so be it, because I just don't think it's really worth much more than that today. But if I hold on to the shares from that point, I'll keep selling more covered calls. My cost basis on it is so low that the essential like yield on cost or whatever I'm getting from those options it's ridiculously good, actually. So I'm perfectly happy just to chill with the position. It's still less than 2% in my value portfolio. So yeah, I'm just chilling and seeing where this ride takes me. But do me a favor and let me know your opinions on Palantir. What's the actual valuation in your eyes? Are you with me where it's like probably a $6 or $7 stock? Or are you with the most bullish of the bulls saying it's a 20, 25 plus dollar stock? If you have Palantir or are interested in it, join the conversation on Discord and let us know your thoughts, or drop a comment below. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and made it this far. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to help me grow my audience. I really appreciate it.